Good morning. I'm Eric Jacobson, Business Growth Specialist with iConnection. iConnection is a digital marketing agency. I'm also the founder of Manufacturer Insights. And I'm excited today to have Ryan Stillwell with Stillwell Risk Partners. Good morning, Ryan.
Morning, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Ryan is the principal and risk advisor for the company. And I'm really excited because today is going to kick off an ongoing series of topics for manufacturers about risk management and risk avoidance. But before I get started with my first question, Ryan, tell us a little bit about your company, your background, maybe how you got started.
Sure, thank you. My name again is Ryan Stillwell. My company is Stillwell Risk Partners, and we are a commercial insurance brokerage and risk management firm. A lot of what we do is heavy emphasis on the risk management side because it directly relates to your insurance. I have been myself in the world of insurance for almost 2 decades now. I started my firm about 3 years ago, and with a focus on working closely with our clients to help them better understand their risk management programs, as well as how that relates to their insurance and make sure they have the right protections in place, whether it's insurance or not.
So, my first question is, why should manufacturers be focused on risk management? What's in it for them? If I'm a CEO of a manufacturing company, I'm probably doing a few things already in the area of risk avoidance, but what should be top of mind? What is it that I always say, don't ask me what keeps me up at night, tell me what should.
Okay. Yeah, so you touched on the first part of it already, right? Most manufacturers are already engaging in risk management to some degree. Maybe you have a formalized program, maybe you don't. But the reason that manufacturers should invest in risk management is there's really two purposes. Number one, all manufacturers face some type of regulatory compliance, right? And this is something that you have to deal with. It can be costly at times. And if it's not done right and you get subject to fines or penalties, that will absolutely have a negative impact on your bottom line. Because you're subject to regulatory compliance anyway, you can take the compliance work that you're doing and leverage that to reduce your total cost of risk, which is how we measure the expenditures that a company faces one way or the other. And as part of that, by reducing those expenditures, you can better your bottom line, right? So investing in risk management will ultimately improve your bottom line results, which is what we're really looking for. In addition, it has a number of other effects on your business. Productivity increases when you have fewer claims, fewer losses. You're able to invest in your people more. And it's one of the key factors that we always think about in risk management is brand and reputation management, right? And it takes a long time to build that up, but one incident can knock it all down. And risk management at its core protects the brand and reputation of the company.
So, one of the things that we've been doing in the Manufacturer Insights events, and it's going to be a big focus for this year, is employee retention and attracting a workforce. There's so many challenges with manufacturers in those areas. I think you may have touched on it. I don't know if you want to expand a little bit, but how can maximizing your risk management impact the ability to attract and retain workers?
So yeah, that's a great question. So how can risk management help retain and attract employees? Well, a good risk management program at its core must be dedicated to from the top of the organization, right? And when the executive team, the leadership team, and everyone underneath you understands the importance of risk management, what that does is it communicates to your employees that you are concerned about them and their safety, right? And the better the engagement from leadership with everybody in the organization, the more effective those programs will be and the more trust gets developed. So you find a good, productive, happy workplace when everybody understands the business goals and how the risk management fits within that. And so the communication from the top is really a core to running a good risk management program. And it naturally filters down to everybody that they see that you're dedicated to it.
So, Ryan, what is the first step that a manufacturer should consider when starting a risk management program?
Sure. So the first step is always the same. It's assessment and identification. You have to understand first what the exposures are before you can take any action to try and improve or resolve them. So through assessment, it can come in a lot of different forms, whether or not we have somebody physically on site to do a physical hazard assessment, or whether we're looking through a number of different checklists and areas of compliance. And so I think this is a good time, Eric, to bring up that graphic that I shared with you. And if we're looking at this, you can see if you look at the outside, there's a lot of different modules that we can assess here and use this tool with. But if you look at the center, right, you can see that it goes from checklist to action guide to policies kit to training, right? And this really reflects the core process of when we're going through development of a risk management program, right? So we do the initial checklist, which is an assessment, and we identify areas. And usually you're going to fall in one of three categories. One is you're at the top, you're best in class, you've got this well covered, and it's a great program that's already in place. And you probably got some things like that. And then the next level down is, okay, we're aware of this level of risk and we feel like we have a good understanding of what it is, but maybe there's some improvements that we can make to get to that best in class level if that's something that we want to invest in. And then you've got a third level of maybe things that are on the radar, but we haven't done anything about yet, or maybe things that are unknowns, right? We were unaware of this risk entirely. And from when we get to that level, we can then say, okay, we feel really confident in these few areas, but we found that we've got real exposure here in a certain area that has not been addressed yet. So that's the assessment and the identification. And then from that point forward, we can say, is this something that we want to invest in? If so, why? Does it align with our overall business goals, or is this going to get in the way? And is this not something that is a real risk for us that we want to tackle at this point in time? So when we talk about starting a risk management program or starting to look at the potential to invest in it, it can be a large undertaking without the right tools in place to be able to conduct that assessment. So what we've done is we've learned from things that have already been done before, right? There's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's just a matter of organizing it and setting it up to help you gain the success that you're looking for in whatever those business goals might be. So the assessment and identification part is really the first step, and it leads into everything else, right? We can, and this is where we talk a lot about in risk management about it being a combination of art and science, right? So this compliant part is really the science of it. The art is where you marry the science and the analysis with it, with where you want to take your business and where does it align, right? Like a great example of this is with an employee handbook, right? A lot of times these things can be cookie cutter when you start them, and everything that's in there may not be for you, right? You may say, well, we're not worried about issue X, Y, and Z, but we're really concerned about making sure that we're communicating what we want with our employees and making sure that they are able to communicate with us so that we can resolve issues in a good, productive manner that not only helps employees know that we care about them, that we're answering their questions. And so that's where the art comes in, is how are we marrying what our exposures are within our larger business objectives? And that's how we end up moving forward. And a lot of times what this comes down to is not everything can be tackled at once, right? We all have limited resources. We all have limited time. So it's a matter of identifying where the areas of concern are, prioritizing them, fitting them into our business goals, and setting a multi-year plan for really managing that improvement over time.
So you mentioned, manufacturer may have done certain things already. Just take a guess. What do you think on a percentage basis? What percentage of companies that you go into have already best in class in place?
As a percentage, it's tough to say. And it's often a sensitive topic because some people may think that they're best in class at something, right? One of the things that we might do is we'll talk to the leadership team and they'll say, okay, yeah, we're all 8s and 9s in all these areas. And then maybe we go and talk to a couple of people on the floor and we see 4s and 5s, right? So there may be a disconnect. So I would say best in class, I would say less than half. I don't know if I'd be able to comfortably say a more definitive number. And usually it's in limited areas, right? It's small businesses. There's a lot on the plate that you have to tackle. And it's really hard to be able to dedicate to best in class unless you have that really formal program.
Yeah. Looking at that compliance checklist, there are many categories that are addressed. So I think it's interesting what you said, that a lot of companies think they're best in class. And it's a question of how do you then move the ones that aren't. That's where you come in. and identify where the weaknesses are and how to strengthen them.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is best in class is always evolving, right? If we talk a little bit about compliance today, and regulatory compliance is always changing. OSHA is always coming up with new rules, right? Just at the beginning of 2024, there's new electronic reporting requirements for OSHA 300 and 301 forms, right? The Department of Labor just came out with a new ruling on under the Fair Labor Standards Act about what defines employees and independent contractors, right? These things are always evolving. So being best in class often relates to how are you keeping on top of things? How often are you reviewing these things? And how often are you implementing change? And more importantly, what is your process for implementing change, right? What is a key idea? Like one of the questions I'll ask a lot of some of my clients is what's your process for reviewing and updating whatever it may be, your OSHA record keeping, your driver safety program, right? Whatever the case may be, it's about the process. And when you ask that question, you get a much more detailed response to it if they have that best in class. So it becomes pretty apparent if they know what they're doing in certain areas. And that's great. I love it when I come in to somebody new and they're doing something, they have a defined process for best in class. And I love hearing about what they're doing to make it better. And a lot of times we have somebody else handles it and maybe they don't know the specific details. But yeah, it's getting to best in class is something you always strive for. It's not something you reach and then you live there, right?
Absolutely. So let's say that a company, a manufacturer, they realize they have a shortfall. They realize they have problems. What's the key to fixing those? How do they get started? What are some of the keys?
Yeah. So the first most important thing is recognizing that there is an issue, right? So getting to that understanding is the first step. So the second step is okay, let's do an assessment and find out where the underlying issues are, right? If there's been several workplace injuries, right, over the course of 3 or 4 years, what we can do is we might decide that, okay, we're going to do a job hazard analysis or a root cause analysis to find out what's going on that's causing these injuries. So that's as we dig into it. But really, the first most important step is, and I touched on this earlier, is dedication to resolving the problem, right? Is ownership, is leadership resolved to understanding and fixing the problem? And are they engaged at multiple levels to do that? And you talk about employee retention. Employees know when you're dedicated to something and when you're not, right? They see it. And if you're dedicated to it, they understand that. And if you're not, if you say, okay, we're going to figure out what this problem is, and then if you put a short-sighted solution into it or a temporary solution, we see that, right? So it's really the core to fixing problems is getting the dedication and commitment from leadership to engage with making that fix, and then digging deep to do the assessment and really build in the plans for how you're going to fix this long term.
Manufacturing CEOs, the CEO of any company, they're always concerned about the bottom line. So if I make an investment, whether it's money or time, in this case, let's say I'm improving my risk management, how can that help my ROI? I'm sure a piece of this is probably insurance costs. If someone's improving their risk management, I'm sure there's a positive effect. But if you could dig into this, is a really important piece of what we're talking about.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's the goal, right? We're looking to improve the bottom line, and risk management is a tool to do so. So, like you mentioned, insurance is a part of that. I mentioned earlier the concept of total cost of risk, or TCOR, as we call it, and what the return on the investment that you can get by investing in risk management is really going to be determined on how you can measure the data, right? And total cost of risk gives us a framework to measure that data. The bigger the company gets, the smaller the portion the insurance makes up of that TCOR, but it's still an important part, and everything will roll down to the insurance, but the insurance is the last step in the process, right? So when we're looking at evaluating TCOR, your total cost of risk, and how much you're really spending on that, there's a few key areas that we look at. Number one is, where are your people spending their time, right? Because time is money and you're paying your people. So where are they spending their time, and where can we streamline some of that? Number two is maybe the investments in safety that you're doing, the PPE that you provide. Maybe if you're running any type of telematics or monitoring program within your facilities, the transactional costs, things of that nature. We can dig into the details of where the money is going and finding out where there's potential savings within that. So it's something that we develop over time. It's not something we can sit down and do a single analysis on. But once you get and start monitoring those data points in a lot more frequency, the more data points you have, the more certain you can be about using some of the science tools that we have in place to do the analysis when we're getting to a question of, should we invest in a certain safety product? Well, how much is it going to cost us? What's the time value of that money, and where else could we put that money? And it gives us a framework from which to evaluate financially where that money should go, right? If you're going to invest $80,000 into a new program, and you're going to say, well, our opportunity cost is investing in maybe hiring somebody else, or maybe buying a new truck or something along those lines. Where is our cost benefit going to be? And then you marry that to the art of it, right? And what's in our business goals? What do we want to purvey to our employees, to our clients, to our customers? And then circling back down to the insurance part is, as we go through this process, we get so many data points that we can correlate to send to the insurance company, right? Because there's a lot of underwriting involved with manufacturing risk. The more ammunition that we have that we can give to our underwriters when we're presenting the submission to them allows us to negotiate more for better terms, better coverages, better pricing. A good example of this would be, let's say that one of the risks that a lot of manufacturers face is loss of business income, right? If there's a fire in their facility and they're shut down for 3 months, what's going to happen to their business, right? The loss of income, the payroll, and everything along those lines, right? But if we have evaluated what your business income risk is, identified the exposures, put plans in place to help mitigate that risk, whether it's a business continuity plan, whether it's disaster recovery plan, things along those lines, we can then present that with the submission to the underwriter and present why you are a best-in-class risk and why they should offer you their best possible terms and conditions. And again, that's everybody focused on insurance costs, but if you focus just on the cost at the start, you're never going to get to the best-in-class at the finish, because the focus is in the wrong area. You focus on the fundamentals, you lay the right foundation, and you build on top of that with that infrastructure that allows us to get to the best possible pricing on the insurance, as well as understanding. And then it all circles back, right? Because then you're doing further evaluations. You're always constantly improving. And then you will see those results for both direct costs, like the insurance cost, and the indirect costs, such as you no longer have as many injuries on site as you did. And one of the nice statistics I like to bring up is, who said it? The Bureau of Labor Statistics, I want to say. I could be getting that reference wrong, but what they say is the indirect costs of an injury are anywhere from 2 to 20 times the actual direct costs. And if you're 2 times the indirect costs, that's best in class, right? So, and it's really hard to get to best in class and to stay there. So if you have an injury and the direct costs are $100,000, you might have $500,000 in costs that's indirect that you don't see without evaluating that.
Not to mention lost time,
Exactly.
potential production delays. So we had a virtual event on the role of automation, and one of the speakers was from Winexia, Tim Pileski, and what they do is collaborative robots. And he talked about the difference between industrial robots and collaborative robots, and there was a safety factor there. Just curious, do you get involved in maybe making recommendations or part of the evaluation process when a manufacturer is looking to automate their facility, and how that may impact their risk factors?
Sure. The robotics and the automation is not something that's like a core competency of mine, but certainly if you're going to make that investment, there are some financial analysis tools that we could help use to say, okay, well, if you're investing X amount of money in automation and it's going to reduce maybe employee count or something along those lines, certainly that's some type of analysis that we can run. And if we can't do that in-house, we have a lot of things that we subcontract out to run that analysis, because it's a little bit off topic, but as the role as a risk manager is to be a mile wide and an inch deep, right? To be able to identify areas of real concern and then find the expert in that area that can go that mile deep in that one specific area. So with that type of thing, I might leverage resources outside of my firm to help undertake that, but that's certainly something we can help with. Yes.
It was an interesting topic because the whole idea of collaborative robots is that you don't have to have that fencing that you have with industrial robots, so they're safer. So if a manufacturer switches from industrial to collaborative robots, that would positively, I would think, impact their risk factor.
From like an insurance evaluation standpoint, it's one of the things that we often see is insurance and in general is slow to move and to adapt to some new things, right? So if it's emerging technology, sometimes that can be a larger risk factor, right? So, and just because it's an unknown, they don't have the actuarial data to really underwrite that. Typically, you need at least 7 years of actuarial data to get to any level of accuracy with loss forecasting. So that's one of the considerations that we'd have as well. So maybe it's just a matter of finding the right insurance carrier that already has those things in place, which can then really evaluate the risk and customize the pricing and terms for it.
So if a manufacturer they're at a certain level of risk management, maybe you come in, you do an analysis, now they're going to move up, they're going to do more things, so they have less risk. I would imagine that there's some kind of lag between the time they implement a program to where they realize insurance savings on the back end. How would they manage that process of reducing their insurance costs? What's that communication process with their insurance company as they're working their way through this improvement in risk management?
Yeah, so it's a really good question because sometimes it doesn't have to take their results to get to the place you want to be with the insurance. And the key is, like you said, it's communication and it's transparency. One of the things that we found really valuable when communicating between the insurance company and the manufacturer is to say, let's all get on the same page here, right? So when I'm preparing, let's say we have we're going to send out to a new insurance company, right? So when we're preparing that submission, we work very closely with our clients to prepare that submission and get that additional paperwork and that documentation that we talked about, whether it's a business continuity plan or the process about how you're updating your safety program or the results that you've had over the last 10 years because of the programs that you've implemented. And we create a really strong narrative around that to give to the underwriter, right? Because if our underwriter can see what you're doing, that will help them to understand it and be able to invest in your business, right? And then on the flip side, maybe we know who the right carrier is here, and we want to bring out their team to you and say, let's get everybody together on the same page. We're all in a partnership together, and we're all here looking to make money. So let's make the insurance company money by reducing the risk factors and limiting claims. Let's help you make money by reducing your insurance and your other risk-related costs. And let's all get on the same page. And when you're invested like that and you have that clear communication and transparency in the process, that's when you get the real best-in-class results.
Ryan, thanks for addressing those questions, providing those answers. I think it may be helpful, again, since this is our overview for the upcoming sessions, let's go back to the compliance checklist, the compliance check diagram, and talk to me about that inner circle. You've spoken about the checklist. Talk to me about the other three components. And then if you could also address the outside pieces, what's the different colors? What do the different colors represent?
Sure. So with the inner circle, right, what we look at there is we have the checklist, we have the action guide, the policies kit, and then the training, right? And this mirrors kind of the risk management process, right? So the checklist is our assessment and identification part of the process. The action guide is then the analysis, right? Where are we going to focus and how are we going to guide our actions going forward? The policies kit represents the implementation part of it, right? So we identify what risks we have. We've assessed what we want to do, and we put some analysis towards it, and we decided that we're going to implement certain things over time. We implement them with the policies kit or any other things that we might use. And then the training represents the control process of it, right? So we want to bring everything together, implement it, train our people on it, and make sure that we have controls in place to make sure it's being effective, right? How do we evaluate that going forward? And then we can continually roll on through this process to do another assessment in the future. How have we done in implementing this? Are there things that we have failed to do, right? So that represents the risk management process, and it continues on. It doesn't end. We cycle back through to the beginning, and that's how we constantly evolve, and that's how we define our processes. In terms of the outside and the different things that are there, if you start on the left with the things in yellow, these are all very safety related. A lot of them have to do with OSHA compliance. Down at the bottom in the blue, we have a couple of things that are much more insurance specific. Fleet safety, the experience mod noted there is very relevant to the workers' comp. We talked a little bit about business income. On the right-hand side, these are very much more human resources related, right? So you can see there the FMLA, right? Family Medical Leave Act, the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? Being in compliance with these things, HIPAA, COBRA, all of these are very HR related and determining how they're being processed. And some of the HIPAA things and the COBRA ERISA requirements are a little bit more like deep dives into very specific areas. And they touch on human resources, but not necessarily always related to them.
So as we look forward to future sessions, the first question I have is who should be attending these? So let's say I'm a CEO, I'm listening today. Should I be bringing someone with me to the next session, giving them the link to the virtual event? And who would that be?
Yeah. So with these things, usually we're talking to the people that are doing the day-to-day stuff. So if we're going to cover an OSHA compliance issue, maybe we're looking at OSHA record keeping, right? Who's doing the OSHA record keeping and what's that? And are they going to be invested in getting to best process? Who's your human resources manager, right? Are we going to do it if we're talking about the employee manual or the ADA or harassment training, things along those lines? Whoever's in charge of that department really should attend because it's going to be knowledge direct to them to help them just to educate and hopefully help them do their jobs better.
Well, I look forward to speaking to you. We'll plan for the next event and do some deep dive into some of these categories, and we'll do that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And yeah, I think the goal is helping manufacturers improve their risk management, avoid some costs, or get a positive return on investment. So yeah, well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll look forward to the next session.
Thank you, Eric. It was a pleasure. Look forward to it as well.